Every experiencer has to overcome ontological shock, and we have to do it while the world tells us we're crazy. Because of this, each of us has our own story, our own helpful perspective, our own set of tools. These are the stories we share in the Experiencer Workshop. This is Peter from OTIR, and so Peter, welcome to Parawareness. I've always seen you as kind of like the data guy. You're the guy actually putting the raw needed data together and doing the work. And I want to just first off say thank you for that, man. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me. I'm really proud to be invited on your show. It's going really well, and I'm impressed with all the work you guys doing. It's really a big inspiration for myself. So I'm a founder of OTIR. OTIR is a group that I founded a few years ago, which is dedicated to research and analysis of the TI phenomenon. And I think we're doing pretty well. We have a strong community going on. We have a lot of materials published, which are a result of this ongoing research and discovery as we go on. And I think the biggest, how should I say it? I think the biggest advantage of OTIR is that is a very different community in sense of, of TI communities as a whole. Most of TI communities, they get locked in this kind of echo chamber situation where people are just repeat each other's ideas. They encourage a certain narrative and they reject anything else as attempts of disinformation. OTIR is different from most of the TI communities in a sense that it is a debate platform. It is not a defense platform. It is not a community of primarily support, but more of discovery and analysis. So when somebody comes on the community, he is supposed, we even have this as a rule in the community, that he has to have an open mind, that he is going to be challenged on his ideas, and he is welcome and even encouraged to challenge others, because we all lack self-reflection. As we get in TI experience, we get a certain narrative going on and certain ideas that we get so firmly cemented in, it gets hard to look back to, to challenge yourself. So this is a big advantage, because this way in a debate, a civilized debate, of course, people get to see that they were wrong. And I try to make it the biggest point of the community that we have to have a debate, that we have to have proper methodology and the proper approach about this whole phenomenon, how we think about it. About myself, I consider myself to be an ex-TI, which is the term I coined for the people who have been through this experience and passed out of the other end, so to speak, which means you are not harassed anymore. You are able to live functionally and comfortably with everything you've been through, and the experience itself, it changes for you. XTIs are characterized not just by the end of the experience, but also of how they are changed by the experience. And we have the whole research on this subject. Because first and foremost, the TI experience is a challenge. People say it's a harassment, it's a torture, etc., but it is first and foremost a challenge. And any challenge is not just possible to be overcome, but it's meant to be overcome, really. And TI experience is the same in this way. My own experience started obviously very negatively. I have been through the whole spectrum of this phenomenon, starting from the voices, of course, which have been the most prominent part of this. I've experienced tactile sensation of all kinds, like taps on the shoulders, zaps, stings in the eye, and etc., etc. The headaches, all the way to the most bizarre and even disabling sensations, like, for example, inability to perform sexually in the critical moments, or the opposite, right? The sexual arousal in very inappropriate moments, which came out of nowhere. And it was obviously made artificially because it coincided with the voices preparing me to this, and et cetera, et cetera. I have experienced bizarre dreams. I have experienced, this kind of double layer out of body experiences where like astral projections, but not by my own initiative, but it was something started by the experience itself. I was artificially put out of my body and made to experience this astral projection kind of stuff, which was quite entertaining, but also completely freaking me out, of course, because it was not done out of my own volition. And all of this was extremely negative for quite a while. So first part of my experience was like hardcore impression of this being done by people, by my neighbors, people around me. And I had no opportunity of challenging this idea. I was just living the experience as by the script. As most guys do, right? You have this overwhelming events, this story, narrative, like Truman Show of a sorts, going on all around you, and you have no chance to breathe, right? You're like scrambling to even follow the storyline, yet alone to analyze it. And then, bizarrely, it ended abruptly as I was going to go to the mental hospital the next day. I already made plans and preparations to go there. And the next morning, it all ended. Like it was switched off. And after a few months, it started again. Before it all was in Italian, because I live in Italy, and it made me think that everybody around were on it. Like even I heard voices of my friends, even not only my neighbors, but my friends, like they were coming to the neighbor's house. And after a few months, it started again. And this time they started to talk to me in Russian. And instead of talking like about me, in the background, like they were watching some kind of screen, instead they were actually talking to me directly. And they even said to me, like, your Italian is terrible anyway, and you don't understand half of what we're talking about. So we just talk to you in Russian. And I was answering to them vocally. And they told me, like, you don't have to speak to us. You just think, and we will understand. And it was overwhelming. Like, what the hell? What the hell am I experiencing? This is like the real telepathy. It was quite a breakthrough for my experience. And then they started to tell me, also in Italian, like they were telling me even the first time, but they were insisting this time in Russian, that I should research about this thing. I should try to discover what it is. And only then I started to Google this whole thing. I discovered how many people, in fact, were experiencing this phenomenon. And it was astonishing. The most incredible was to see how similar our stories are. Like it's the whole pattern. And that was the point where I started to see the procedural nature of this experience. It's not some kind of randomized thing. No, it has characteristics. It has like certain plot twists, certain tricks and techniques that are used very consistently among very different people of different nationalities and continents. Like, for example, the good cop and the bad cop scenario, where somebody would, some of the team of the voices would start to actually, stand for you and try to plead with the others. Like, no, please, we're making a mistake. This guy is innocent. We don't have to actually torture him. We made a mistake, etc. And there would be some especially nasty person who would just ruin it, as everybody is going to pack up and leave you alone. And he would say, no, look, the new evidence came up. This guy, we can't leave. So your hope, it gets pumped up and then it gets completely crushed, right? So this is one of the very prominent techniques that I use, and there is a whole set of this kind of stuff. I have a report number 2 on the OTIR, which covers all of these late stage psychological tricks. First thing to learn was that most of the experience is based on deception, or even like almost all of it is deception. And you cannot believe what you hear from the voices. You cannot for a second, allow yourself to relax, even if they say what you'd like to hear. That's how people get caught on all kinds of ego bait. Like, for example, like you're chosen one, you're in the reincarnation of Jesus, etc., etc. People like TIs are very susceptible to this kind of stuff. I was there as well. They almost completely convinced me at one time that I was some kind of a psychic, and I was a candidate for the special school of psychic, like I don't know, Harry Potter style or something. And they and as I would pass the tests, they would take me and make me part of their secret community, give me superpowers, help me to evolve my abilities, because apparently I had some abilities, of course. Certainly all of this was bullshit. So the point I'm trying to make, I guess, is there are multiple levels of deception in this experience. First is what they say to you exactly, but then the deception is the whole narrative that they're trying to sell you. For example, if let's take the stage 1 of the TI experience, the very basic stage where people just enter into this narrative and they feel that their neighbors are starting to do some shenanigans against them. They spy on them. They know too much. They talk about their private stuff, and even then they tell wrong things. They exaggerate. They invent some absurdities, and it feels like they spreading rumors, false rumors about you. So you hear them telling lies, and you get confused, etc. But the whole premise of somebody spreading the rumors is also a lie. And on top of this, the premise of them being your neighbors is also a lie. And there are so many levels of this, but at the best, most guys, they manage to challenge only just the lie in front of them, but not the bigger lie about the experience itself. And as you go higher, discovering more and more layers of this deception, you come to realize that the whole experience, the whole negativity of it, the whole torture and harassment thing is also a deception. The negativity and abuse that they use is in fact not a purpose, but a tool to reach the actual goal. And at OTIR, we have report number 3, which is the most important one so far that I have published, where I meticulously analyze what is the actual purpose of TI experience. Why is it happening to us, right? And for most TI, it's an incomprehensible task to do this by themselves, because the personal experience is always a deception. It's so meticulously crafted that you cannot really see it unless you step aside and look at it from the perspective. You have to match your experience to the others to see that the things you thought were important, they aren't really, they're just narrative instruments. The only important thing is the patterns, there's the metadata analysis, how the experience correspond to each other. And this allows us to see the truth. Let me give you a simple example. Every once in a while, somebody will pop in the community and they will say, I'm getting killed. Like there is this guy who does this for years, I think, right? He pops in the community, posts a few things like, I am being killed right now. And like it lasts for years. And every time I tell him, okay, you aren't really dead yet. And you like, You post this since like 2021, I don't know, and you're getting killed every day, but you're not getting killed. However,
right.
he's so had in his experience, he cannot comprehend that it may just not be true. If you step back and look at the multitude of experiences, you are able to see that, in fact, most of TIs, they don't really die. But almost everybody is getting convinced, right, that they are getting killed.
Right. That's right.
This persuasion, this idea of getting killed is a part of the pattern. And it's also not true. So if you have this collective data, you can see this for yourself early that, okay, I'm just getting fooled like all of these other people. And they have come through it. They are all right. They aren't killed, in fact. And they even heard the same things, the same threats to the letter. So what it means for me, it means if I am having the same experience as these guys, then most likely I am also not getting killed. And if everybody says, just pay no attention to this, just don't care about it and you'll be fine, maybe I should take this advice. So this is how we should really approach it.
And so that's paper 3?
Yes.
Yeah. So paper 3, and how many papers do you have so far?
I have much more papers unpublished than I have published.
Right.
I have 3 major reports. First one covers the idea of if it's even possible that TI experience is conducted by special services like CIA, KGB, etc., like Mossad. This is a very firm idea in TI communities that this experience is done by them. And I was also thinking in the same way, but as I was progressing, I saw more and more contradictions to this view. You had to really start ignoring data to keep yourself thinking that. And this is actually a natural progression of shift of the perspective. You get more data, and you are not fitting anymore to the previous viewpoint. You have to, it just crumbles and you find a new perspective through this. So the first report is, this is how the whole community started, right? I did this report and I published it. And as I wrote this paper, I saw definitively for myself that it just was not possible. There is too many contradictions to the fact that to the theory, I'd say, that it's humans. The few arguments pro are overwhelmed by so many arguments contra, like the timeline or scale. The timeline is my biggest issue with this, because TI phenomenon is just so old. You go farther into the past and you see it's in the early 20th century, in the 19th, 18th century. You go even farther in the story, in history, and you see demonic possession cases, which like mirror TI experience. It's the same. The jinn possession cases, the Islamic culture and Middle East culture, they have a very detailed records of jinn possession. And they even described the jinn entities just as we describe the perpetrators now, right? They had ability to mimic anybody they liked to mess with people, to trick them, to deceive them, to bring them into despair. The synchronicities were happening all the time. They had this kind of supernatural abilities, able to manipulate mind, matter, manipulate people even, to possess them and act out of character completely. Something that is very familiar to TIs, where we see even our very closest people sometimes getting to act in very strange way, and they won't even remember it later, which is another characteristic. Almost as if they being overridden, like Agent Smith took over people in Matrix. Just possessing their bodies. It's not as visual. So talking about the negativity of the phenomenon, as I was looking on the on the progression, on the perspective, my own experience ended. And I have started to meet a lot of people who also had passed through the TI experience. They were changed by it profoundly. And what defines XTI, in my opinion, is that they are not susceptible to the TI experience anymore. Even if it happened to them again, they will be able to handle it completely. And however, experience ends for them anyway, because it has done its job effectively. So this is how I was able to see the whole progression of TI experience. Right? It has a procedural nature. It is a process. It is very stable of how it goes for different people in different timelines, and it has defined start and it has defined end. So in my mind, a procedure which is very stable, if it has an end, it should also be consistent, right, across the experiences. And it by the idea, it should define also the goal of the experience. So if the process has ended, it means that goal has been achieved. So by looking to the people who have passed through the whole procedure, we can see what the experience tried to do with those people. And I discovered a very consistent pattern of changes that is happening to TIs, to the XTIs, as they approach or even exit the experience. There are about 20 distinct qualities which all boil down to increased self-control, to increased resistance. For example, people become almost invulnerable to abuse, to insults, to manipulation, to all kinds of, their weaknesses, they get either eliminated or diminished in such a way that is completely becomes a non-factor for them, which is quite bizarre, right? But if we think about what experience actually does, taking like emotion aside and pain aside, what it does is it trains us. It gives us relentless abuse, but by doing this, it makes us less and less sensible to this abuse. If you are being told every day that you're ugly, you're fat, you're bald, this one we both know, but if you get told this like once a day, like it will hurt every time. If you get this, if you hear this like once an hour, you will be very upset. But if you hear this like every minute, after a while, it will just become meaningless.
A word that knocked around a lot in my head through most of my experience was inoculation.
Right. So it's almost like not even almost. It is basically an exposure therapy. Very, it's violent, it's abusive, of course. Yeah, I'm not advocating for this. I should make a point, right? I'm not saying it's great. It should be like everybody should get it. Like if you could, right? It is very painful and it's even dangerous in a lot of cases. But it's just something that happens. So it's best if we understand it at least, right? What it wants to do, what it wants to achieve. Because a lot of suffering happens not even because of the abuse itself, but of how it makes us feel combined with our conception of it, right? Most people, they think that their private information is exposed to everybody around, their thought gets broadcasted and so on, because this is how they feel, this is how narrative presents itself to them. But it's not just not true. The thoughts aren't getting broadcasted. You getting they show it to you, but it's not how it really works. And if people who suffer from this very, very much, if they just knew it, that it's not true, then their whole suffering will be very much diminished. But this social element of, getting everything exposed to people around you, and not knowing who is agent, who is a threat to you, this ramps up the experience so much. So just simple knowledge can eliminate a lot of negativity of the experience. So this is why it's important to understand, to figure this stuff out and get your emotions aside. Because if you get your emotions to control your thought process, basically you have no thought process. You're just being led by emotions. Emotion is an enemy of mind.
Because I had a neighbor flip it on me. I haven't gotten to tell you, I don't think about this very much, Peter, but I had a neighbor that was hearing me through the window and decided that I was, because of the things I was talking about through Parawareness, decided that I was in on this big thing that had to do with him. So I went from being this person who knew that my neighbors were out to get me, and to the point where I wanted to hurt them, right? I had to make it stop. I had to make it stop. And then all of a sudden, now I'm in a position where my neighbor is physically threatening me because the phenomenon is working through him. Yeah. So what I wanted to make sure and check with that is because one of the main things that makes this so difficult for everyone, I think, is the synchronicities. Indeed. And so, we talked to James in episode 3 about the synchronicities, and I would love to hear what you're looking at in all of your data and stuff like that in your papers, and where does synchronicities play into this as far as the not training program, but what is it called? Behavior modification program view that you have.
I would say like personality change, right? It's personality. It's not about behavior. Because behavior is very easy to imitate. If we were basically told how experience wants us to act, we would all be acting in this way just to get out. It's easy. What experience really wants from us is to change so profoundly that these changes become ingrained in our nature, that we get to become different people. So we don't have to consciously think about our actions or reactions. It will just come out naturally because of who we are now, as opposed to before. Talking about synchronicity, though, I think it's very underestimated factor of not just TI experience, but of existence itself. Consider this. TIs experience hundreds, sometimes thousands synchronicities a day, especially in the hardest period, in the most intense parts of experience. Very minuscule actions, if you think of how they have to be constructed to happen, right? For example, seeing people in red on the street, everybody is in red, right? So for this to happen, a lot of people had to dress in red unconsciously, because of course, most of the viewers might not think so, but me and you, we know that nothing is really like this agent network. People are affected subconsciously, and so things are just lined up perfectly to happen. So if you go outside of your door in 3 a.m. because you avoid your neighbor, you can be sure that your neighbor will be compelled to get up at 3 a.m. also to get a Coke or something, because he will just feel so thirsty, and he will have to go outside, and you will see him and he will see you, and it will be like 100 times for a week. So for things like this to happen, so many things have to happen before as a prerequisite, right? For even a single person to have a red shirt outside, he had to buy a shirt before. He had to have this shirt clean for the day. He had to be there in this specific place and time. So his schedule, his whole timeline of his life has to align with yours. by all of these different events. Maybe somebody called him to meet somewhere. Maybe he has to go to job interview or etc., etc. But a lot of things has to happen for a little, very, very little result, just for you to notice some specific thing. And if you think how much of this has to happen, and how easy it would be to make all of these chains of events to go wrong, like the butterfly effect. And there are so many TIs, so many synchronicities, so many people. Basically, everything has to be coordinated, right? Every single aspect of everything, because we are so interconnected in our life. We are so, even if you don't think about it, even if you complete shut-ins, we still affect a lot of people, even by going online, talking to someone, like expanding their ideas, changing their mind, and then affecting their life in the future, right? Something done a year ago, something random, chaotic, will completely change a lot of people's life to today or tomorrow. So,
right.
My view on synchronicity is it is such an intricate system, so complex and so effort consuming, that I don't see a place for chaos in this system. I am seriously considering that the synchronicity, the existence of synchronicity phenomenon and how it affects our lives, and the scale that it exists on, is a pretty major sign that we might in fact live in completely predetermined reality. That everything we experience is like a big narrative, like a big book where everything is written down, and you can, like the author is already wrote everything, but the character inside this book doesn't know how it will end. For him, the stakes are real, everything is real, and his character arc, which is a very important thing in TI experience, his character arc will go and he will grow, he will change, he will experience ups and downs, and he will get traumatized, and he will understand things, he will get his own catharsis, and by the end of the book, he will be a completely different person. And this is the main point of the story. And this might as well be a main point of our stories, which is, if you go a little bit of the of the plan, which is actually a conclusion I have in my yet unpublished paper, report number 4, where I explore the whole supernatural aspect of TI experience and how it is tied to pre-birth experience, to the near-death experiences, where people see the same perpetrators, and how it all connects to the reincarnation. I am not a religious person. I am not a spiritual person. I am atheist through and through. Yet I cannot avoid coming to the supernatural conclusions, because what we deal with is not a natural phenomenon. It's not a natural power. It's not a human-made phenomenon. It is something that is so powerful and so all-encompassing that it affects everybody on this planet constantly, 24/7. There is not a single person, in my opinion, that is not affected by this phenomenon. There are so only people unaware about the existence of this phenomenon. This is what differs us. Like those, like if you go to the Matrix scenario, we were being shaken like this in our capsules. Not everybody is woken up yet, but you can't sleep anymore. You won't be given ability to sleep. Your cup of gruel is already on the table. So yeah.
Yeah, and so with the synchronicities and all that, I've been through, like you're saying. I mean, we all have, but for me, they are right now. They are pretty much constant. The synchronicities are, just all day, every day. But I also still, after 10 years of this experience, I still have literally every second of every day physical and voice interactions all day long. And so when you're saying that, like, the TI experience ends for people. What about people like me? What about people who go, well, hold on, I still feel like I'm experiencing it. Are you saying that it's not the same experience because I don't believe it and I'm inoculated now to these things and I don't care when they call me fat and bald?
Effectively, TI experience cannot end. It cannot be finished 100% as it cannot be started 100%. You are born experiencing and you die experiencing, but the quality of the experience, it will change a lot as people can define a start of the harassment. But before that, they also experience some events. Rarely, sometimes, maybe they don't remember it or maybe they don't pay attention to it, but they still experience something. And the same goes to with the end of experience. Most of TIs, they don't get harassed anymore after they are out of the experience. The end is not some date or some switch. It usually goes down gradually. And you just realize one day that you haven't heard them for a few days. And that even if you heard them, you don't even care or they don't harass you, etc. But basically it's going, the whole, the quality of the experience, it transforms and it starts to be from the negative, it gets to neutral and then it gets to almost or very well defined positive. For example, in my own case, it was a gradual shift to the neutral discussions with the voices that coincided with me completely not giving a damn about what they had to say, what they thought. It wasn't like I actively ignored them or tried to shift my attention from what they say. No, I just didn't care. Like whatever. Like, yeah, you say I'm fat. Like, who cares? I don't give a shit. Yeah. And then they stopped doing this completely because they have finished this scope of this task. They didn't have to do it anymore. What they did, they made me not being reliant on somebody else's opinion, not really giving a weight of expectations of somebody else, of what they think I should be, of how they qualify me, and so on. So then it shifted to a very rare and more of a positive conversations where they would pop up to encourage me, for example, or they would give some just friendly comment. And I also found myself able to call to them. Basically, I would focus and I would hear them whenever I wanted. So it's like almost like a superpower to me and I wouldn't want to lose it. It's very fascinating to me. It's very interesting to have this ability, basically. It's not like they give me any positive information, or any useful information, but they would occasionally give me encouragement or commentary or even an advice, and it would turn out good.
How often would you say the voices give you good advice? Like, how many times in the last year have you received I mean, can you throw a number, kind of a roundabout number out? Like, it's every day?
Unquantifiable. I would speak to them almost every day myself, and we would discuss things that are going on in my life. What kind of direction should I take? It's not like they give me directions, really. I am always consciously making my own choices. But they would almost, it just helps. Like you would speak to a friend to just voice your own ideas, and as you voice them, you would realize the right direction. It's kind of the same way. So I would say our relationship with my own perps, they are very friendly right now, which must be bizarre to hear for a lot of people. Like how they are so negative, so terrible. And yeah, I had a lot of grief because of this experience. I have been into prison for a few months. I still serve my prison sentence over from failed attempts to kill myself multiple times, which have led me to prison because I made artificial gun. And, Italy it's not a joke in Italy. It's very known. So, yeah. But I'd say overall the experience had it was very learning experience for me, very formative. I grew so much over myself that I would not be able in 100 years. I am a completely different person. I was super self-criticizing. I was extremely, I was very prideful, and yet I had extremely low self-esteem.
Exactly.
So both of these things, they have balanced out effectively, which is very comfortable to me. It allowed me to do so much things. Even the publication that I put online, or like sitting, talking to you right now, it would be impossible to think of for me before this whole thing.
Same here. I had a combination of the inflated ego. It's basically what I'm looking at lately is everything seems about being balanced a lot. And so when your ego is imbalanced, then it throws everything off. And I at the same time, like you're saying, I at the same time hated myself and just bagged on myself, and it made me hate everybody else too a little bit. Right. And then once you learn to love yourself and get your ego balanced out, then you're able to treat other people more fairly, and you treat everyone more fairly, including yourself, right?
Exactly. The experience forces us to these points of extreme self-loathing or extreme self-pity. It forces us to hate people, or on the opposite, it puts us to shame over things that we did in the past, because, we have to go through all the cringe from the past while talking to the voices. They bring up everything and make us relive this again and again until we don't care anymore. Thankfully, a lot of my emotional baggage was thrown to the trash thanks to this experience. Although it's so painful while you live through it, but no pain, no gain. And I don't want to piss off people who are actively suffering. I'm very sorry that you are in this process right now. So what I want to do is to help everybody to realize that it is not a death sentence. It is not created to destroy you. I have this parable that I love to use. It's like you are being thrown into custody of an old kung fu master that is very, very old, very angry. He doesn't talk to you. He doesn't teach you anything. He just beats you all day, every day. He just beats you and beats you and beats you. And you can't escape. You can't go away. So you only have a few choices, right? You can get beaten and suffer about it and cry about it, or you can start to learn how to evade his attacks, or you can begin getting tougher, so his attacks are becoming ineffective against you. And after a few years, you realize that you are the different person who is able to easily deal with everything he can throw at you, that you yourself have become a kung fu master. So if you use this experience as a free training of your willpower, of your character, you don't pity yourself and get into the pit of despair about this and just cry every day, but you just see it as an opportunity to grow and use this negativity as a training apparatus. So you will be getting stronger, you will be growing, and you will be getting what is negative, you will turn it to your benefit. It's a hard thing to just, you cannot just switch into this mentality, of course. It's something that you have to come to yourself. Basically, it's a path that only you can walk. But it's a challenge that was designed specifically for you, for each of you. A lot of people, they don't understand why one person experiences this certain aspect and another distance, because they work with your personal shortcomings. Wherever you are weak, this is what they're going to attack. They want to bring you to the balanced state. They want to bring you to make you a self-controlling, not them controlling, but self-controlling person. This is why they wear this extremely negative, over the top, completely cartoonish evil masks. Like they would make their personalities so excessively antagonistic that you will have no way but to fight against them. You will hate them, and this will motivate you to fight against them. You are not given a choice to just sit and do nothing. You are actively challenged by an adversary. So basically you win on your own terms, while the whole thing was just a construct, an engineered situation to begin with. I feel a lot of people, a lot of TIs will be offended by the whole premise that this whole situation that make them lose so much is for something so seemingly absurd as a growth of an individuum. But you have to look at this from much bigger perspective than even a singular life, because this thing, it operates on level of multiple lives, of chains of reincarnations. A little bit hard to explain in a singular video. I would have to put maybe my own videos online about this, hopefully someday. But if you consider like how big this phenomenon is and what it does for so many years, for ages, for millennia, it always been here, not next to us, not amongst us, but above us. We are effectively, as a society, as a civilization, we are integral, we are encompassed by something that conducts this experience among all the other things, because TI experience is just a minor part of the whole humanity narrative that we live in, the collective idea. But subconsciously, the same thing affects the whole society, the whole things. Like it engineers wars and it ends them. It creates religions and it makes them fight amongst themselves. This is this is so much bigger than it seems to be.
If you pray for something, God doesn't just give you the answer, right? And then I've been looking a lot lately at parables, I think I talked about in our last video, looking at parables and stories and how they don't give you the answer. They give you the tools with which to figure out the answer, right?
Exactly.
There's something happening here. Our reality is not what we think that it is. And that's so scary for people. Do you ever worry that people like you and I are going to catch crazy stones thrown at us?
I'm getting shot 100%.
Yeah. Right.
I even wrote it in. I wrote it into the book that I'm writing about this whole thing, and it's like a kind of science fiction book, which is a little bit into the future, and it opens with a review of this book itself, written by some. It's like meta, right? So the book starts with a review of itself and of the author, me, and it says like, this guy, he's completely fucked up and he was shot and he deserved it.
That's hilarious, man. I mean, it's how a lot of people are confused by how people like us can laugh about these things and be happy and live a life and be a good person or whatever. And then while at the same time, during this talk, I've had interactions from an unseen force that I have no idea what it is. And, right. But so it confuses people. So that's what I love, getting these videos out, talking to all the different people and having these different servers for the TIs, that we can all, explore it. a big thing right now is the TI feed in your algorithm. You'll get so many things in your algorithm that you're like, okay, someone's messing with my algorithm. Yeah, well, and maybe it's us doing it through creation, just that we can help to create our own reality. But that's something that I'll be discussing more in the future. But I did want to ask you real quick. So Kevin, when he's going through hard times, he has Buddhist philosophies that help him calm down, help him deal with the fear that this phenomenon brings, right? And then he was on a podcast with a couple of Christian people the other day, and he asked them, like, you know, does it work whenever you are going through a scary time, you're fearing for your life, you're fearing, and you call out to Jesus? Does it calm you? And they said, yes, it certainly does. And he said, that's what Buddhism does for me. So as someone who is an atheist and proud, and I like that, I'm glad, you know what I mean? I really support people to be themselves. But so as someone who is an atheist, where do you find the solace whenever you're being attacked? Do you just go search for truth? What, you know, like in your reality, what do you go with that helps calm you?
Right. So when I was actively harassed, I didn't have any kind of spiritual outlet. I certainly experimented with that, but I didn't have an actual belief. So it wasn't viable for me. I was basically laughing at myself as I tried to use some kind of mantra. Like, what the hell I'm doing? Like, this is so pointless. And of course it didn't work, because the thing of belief, it's a crutch, like it's a psychological anchor, which gives you a sense of faith and a sense of security, because you believe in these things. The same as it's not so much about religion or like gods or powers. It's about human psychology. People who are being actively scammed, and they think they are getting $1 million from Nigerian prince, they feel an overwhelming sense of financial security out of it. And they are ready to spend a ridiculous sum of money to some legal fees and etc., because they feel they are very financially secure. They don't feel doubt. They don't feel, so it's a source of strength to them, even if it's false. If you see where I'm leading to this. As an atheist, to me, I tried more to understand what do they want from me, and it was hard to understand, because they would say this or that, and I would not have any real basis of verifying any of that, right? They would claim they wanted to evolve my abilities, psychic abilities, or they wanted to suck my energy, or they wanted to kill me, to frame me, etc., etc. And I had no way to verify any of that. So instead, what I did is I tried to trace what they actually did, right? I tried to understand their goals from their actions. And it gave me a lot of interesting discoveries. Like, for example, I found out that most of what they told me was not an active dialogue even. It was just a mess of psychological triggers given out one after another, like throwing shit and seeing what sticks, except they knew perfectly what stuck. So they would exploit the subject of poverty, for example, right? I struggled with money, as any TI does. And they would say, oh, you're so poor, you don't have any money. And I would start to pity myself. I would start to blame them. Yeah, I'm so poor. It's because of you assholes. And they would laugh at me, and I would get it. So the whole chain of psychological manipulation would stem from there. And if I managed to cut this off, and like, oh shit, they're doing this again. They just trying to hook me on something, and I would shift my line of thought to something else. And then they would bring the different subject, like, I don't know, like, oh, you're such a loser, you never achieved anything. And I would like, yeah, because you made me fail things, you made me lose opportunities, etc., etc. And again, I would get angry. So by seeing what they do, I finally managed to learn. I wrote everything down, everything they said. I made a little table and I would mark a certain phrase when it popped up. It was like just a number of 50 or so phrases given at random amount. And it was, as I did this table, it was just like a game, like a darts of sorts. They would throw, and then I would put a dot where it landed, and I would get a timeline, like a graph of what they use it more often, less often. And this empowered me, of course, because I felt like, now I'm getting something. Not, patents and stuff, but I'm getting to discover what they actually do and how their methodic works. And by seeing how they work, I made myself less vulnerable to it, of course.
So you have this atheist perspective where you just look at it as, like you said, throwing a dart and tracking the darts and using that data to determine what the point of this experience is for you. And then, like we said, comes from a Buddhist philosophy. And then I always talk about that, the book that changed my life, which was Conversations with God, which is a model of spirituality that is, some people call it New Age, but it's basically like that we create our own reality with our thoughts and intentions, that our thought, word, and deed end up creating our reality.
I certainly think there is some merit to this thought, like we do form our reality, but not exactly in a way that, we just send our wishes, we just imagine how we are dealing with, basically we are interacting with an interface, which is represented to some of the people by these voices, by these entities contacting us, and they are able to do anything. So when we think about something, when we dream about something, wish for something, sometimes, which is why I always say, be careful what you wish for, sometimes, or even more often than sometimes, they come true because they are able to act and interact with what we wish. Or if we go really deeper about it, they are able to make us wish what will happen, So, for example, if you are born in poverty, you will, of course, wish for prosperity. So then they would organize things to go, to go better for you, for example, and you would think that your wish actually came true because you wished for it. But it will all be planned way, way before you even were able to form a coherent thought. So regarding the religion as a whole and its relation to the OTI phenomenon, I am a firm believer in the fact that all religions are stemming from OTI phenomenon. Like if you dig deep enough in any of the religions, basically, you will see that at the core of it, there were prophets who spoken with the voices, who were channeling information given to them unchecked and unverified, which ends up sometimes in very bizarre claims and beliefs. Effectively, every prophet, in my opinion at least, was ATI or had to some part ATI experience. Of course, term ATI didn't exist back then. There were contactees, effectively, right? Something external, something alien to the human form, contacted them and made them believe that though they are contacted by a higher being, by all-powerful being that has proven its capabilities to them, which happens a lot with a lot of TIs in the later stages, especially when the phenomenon starts to show more actively its supernatural capabilities to you. We actually, from this viewpoint, we have insane asylums full of actual literal Jesuses right now. Because Jesus was not in a bit different from those people who have TI experience today. Yeah, you can argue there were kinds of miracles and etc., etc., But, history is a long thing. And as people get interested in different interpretations of what they see, of what actually happened, of, isn't even a miracle to have to speak with the voices, right? It's in itself, it should be considered a miracle because it's not a technical ability or something.
I was in church and we read the book of Solomon, I believe, or something like that. But anyways, the story of Saul, and Saul here starts hearing a voice in his head, and he goes, "Hey, and he's like, 'What do you want, teacher, master?' And then the master's like, 'Shut up! I didn't say anything. Go to bed,' And he's like, and then he hears the voice again, and he goes, 'I'm hearing a voice. Oh, it must be my teacher.' And it's like, no. And so when I saw that, I was like, hold on, that's the exact experience that I basically had. Exactly. We all had. And then so when you look at that, what you're saying about Jesus having an experience. How many assumptions, I wonder, and I know this might be hard for people to hear, but how many assumptions did he have to make in order to put this all together? Like, because yesterday I was watching a video of this woman who was on a podcast that she said, she was from the Arcturian, Palladian, something like that system. She was a star seed, and she was, and she knew all these things, and she had all this information. And I started looking at that and going, okay, this feels like a TI who bought in fully, and then they used that experience to tell a narrative. Yeah. And he would, the host would ask her things like, "Hey, how do you know this? Or what did you actually experience that made you believe this fully?" Yeah. And she would say, "Well, it's just something that you kind of end up knowing." And then she would go, "Well, I can't really explain it, and stuff like that." Right. So for me, like it's been a huge part of it is just stop the assumptions. If we can just cut out every assumption that you can dig. And so that's what this phenomenon is for me, is find every single assumption that you can root out and get it out of there. Do you feel like that?
Exactly. It's a biggest trap to not being able to tell assumption from an actual fact. And it's so hard in the start of the experience, but as it progresses, you are kind of meant to go through it because you are given more and more clues, more and more information about how things really work, and you are meant to start discerning those things. So it's the assumptions is what keeps people very very firmly locked in certain stages of the experience. I have recently brought out an example of how people, TIs, get to think that they are being poisoned, right? A lot of TIs, they say, I'm being poisoned every day. My food is poisoned. My water is poisoned. Air is poisoned, everything. And when you would ask them why they think that, they say, well, because I feel poisoned. So I would say, then all that you know is that you feel poisoned, but not that you actually poisoned. So the fact is that you have this feeling. If they go to the lab and they test their blood, they test like everything, they would usually find no drugs, no poison, nothing, because all the experience is just feeling, and this feeling can be induced very easily as like the abilities of so-called perpetrators, they're really astonishing because they can cancel out any drug, any medication effect, or they can induce any effect if they want it without actual presence of the substance. They work directly with the nervous system, with perception, with our body. They are giving commands to any of our organ, but mostly they like to mess with perception, of course, right? Creating feelings of things that aren't there, like excessive heart palpitations. Oh, okay, I'm feeling I'm going to have a heart attack. And then you go to ER and you're completely fine. You don't even have any conditions to your heart. It's perfectly fine. And, but people, they tend to hold to these assumptions because it's very plausible, right? You have this very negative influence in your life from a very terrible people. And of course, they would want to poison you, you'd think, because you have this feeling. And based on this feeling, people start acting in counterproductive way, right? They would throw away all their foods. They would be afraid, very paranoid to go to the groceries because they think that somebody places poisoned foods right before they are about to take them from shelves. They would spend tons of money on filters and everything, start detoxing with even more toxic stuff like borax, because they need to urgently get the toxins out of their body, otherwise they're going to die. And they would certainly really think that they're about to die because of the assumptions that they get poisoned. So
do you think someone could kill themselves with these thoughts? Just through the thoughts of the assumptions? I never thought about the thought that what if you could kill yourself through assumptions?
Well, even the assumption of this experience is never going to end, I will suffer forever, it is enough for certain people to kill themselves, I think. It was certainly enough for me to try to do it. And yeah, my story is even a bit more ridiculous, because the most hurtful thing for me was to realize that this is the all-encompassing powerful entity, and it made my life so shitty instead of making it so much better, because it could, right? It could make us all kings if it wanted to. But instead I had been a loser my whole life. I had achieved nothing. I'm poor. I am yada, yada, yada. I'm old already. So this made me feel very angry and desperate. And also I understood that I held no control over my life, right? And it meant that whatever I do, it's basically pointless. What's the point of even living in this? And that assumption that my life will never be joyful anymore, that I will always will live with this feeling of being controlled, and it will make no sense. This was very difficult for me, and this was one of the reasons why I wanted to kill myself. So yeah, I think some people, I would be dead right now if experience did not actively prevent it from happening. Like I tried to do it over a dozen times, and every time I was stopped. Just like many other people who tried to shoot themselves and the gun didn't go off, who tried to hang themselves and the ropes were snapping. I've seen so many cases. Almost every TI, basically at this point, that I spoke to, they had some sort of experience of trying to end their lives. And the most popular thing that happens is that they just didn't feel like this anymore. And it happened to me as well, right? In the critical moment where you're super agitated, you're ready to do this, and you just feel nothing. You're just completely calm, and you feel like a fool even trying to attempt it.
Oh, yeah, it's very chagrined, huh? I mean, because it's fascinating to me that I've heard so many stories about people who tried and had, miraculous things happen that got them out of it, So I think that that's one reason that I think that we can kind of, I don't have fear now in a way, because
exactly.
I think I'll go out when I go out, when they
exactly.
when right. So
it's very interesting to live with this understanding that indeed nobody will die before he is meant to die, and at the same time, I think we all should be careful. Obviously, we shouldn't walk the tall buildings or jump the bridges just to see what will happen, just to see how we will be saved. No, the experiences makes it clear that if you mess around, you will find out. You will be allowed to damage yourself. I put myself to jail, right? Because I tried to kill this. Okay, you want trouble? Here you go. And it was a learning experience. I've met a guy who tried to shoot himself. He wasn't allowed to do it. His hand twitched in the last second, and he lost an eye. His brain wasn't hurt, but he lost an eye. At the same time, we hear a lot of stories where TIs actually ending up killing himself. Like it's not even like a statistical margin of error. It's less than that. Even if you consider all of these suicide cases to be TI cases, it's not. But still, it's allowed to happen in some cases. I think, in part at least, to create the sense of caution for TIs. The stakes are real. Yes, experience doesn't want you that. But if you insist, it might just happen. So just be careful. And it will certainly allow you to, for example, become paraplegic. Like if you drop from the high place and break your back, you will be still having TI experiences, but also you will be disabled, which is not a cool thing to do.
Yeah, it's going to get even harder, right? You're just taking a chance, rolling the dice on making your life even harder while you're having to go through this experience that was so hard that you've offed yourself, right?
Yeah.
So
that's, I think, why I was allowed to put myself in prison in the end, because without it, I would be keeping trying. The prison really gave me a good shake up, and I understood that things could get worse. You thought it was bad being a TI, and well, now you're in a fucking jail cell. So how's that? And I was, okay, it's not good. So yeah.
Jerry Marzinski talked on our interview with him about basically a TI, right? A schizophrenic, as they called it at the time, who had a gun, and he would fire it into the ground and it would fire.
Yes.
And then he would put it to his head and pull the trigger and it would click. And then he would fire it into the ground and then he would do that and it would click. And he finally threw the gun down and yelled at the sky, "I get it." Okay, I get it. So,
I've heard so many stories like this. It's almost a norm in TI experience. And people who stay around in the community, they get to hear a lot of this. It's so bizarre. And at the same time, I think if you did something like this in a lab setup with cameras rolling, you'd be allowed to die because the experience doesn't want it to be provable. It's very interactive. It will always mess with any kind of experiment, any kind of measurements. It will love to create a false impression or a false positive. And by its nature, it's not something that we can prove reliably and physically. We can only study it and prove it and get any data by metadata analysis, by the analysis of many experiences over duration of time, over the whole length from the beginning to the end.
Excellent. Hey, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Will you tell? Oh, and by the way, Kevin from Parawareness messaged me and I got the little notification down here. He said, "Tell Peter hello." So yeah, if you want to tell everybody where they can find you and what you've got coming up, if you have anything, I'm
getting my website up, the website of OTIR.org. It is already kind of up, but the homepage is blocked by the under construction. So if you navigate there and you type in the address bar /home, it will bring you to the real homepage. But maybe by the time this is up, I will be already putting the website completely online, which will allow people not only to read the updated and, proofread version of all of my materials, but also I am building in quite a lot of interesting tools. One of them is the assessment, which allows anybody in any stage of experience to get a quick self-diagnostic of what he is going through and how to deal the best with the hardest aspects of what he experiencing right now. It also allows the website to get the anonymized data of how people dealing with their experience on what stage they are in. So the idea is to collect a lot a lot of big data that we can be able to study, much more hands-on, because currently I get most of my data through the talking with people. It's not as systematic as I'd like. And it's not really shareable because, I get accumulated impression. I have a lot of singular cases, but can I see a percentage from that? Can I see the raw numbers? In a lot of times I can't. And this, I hope, will be a very powerful tool of research, not only for me, but for anybody who will like to join, which I also would very, very much appreciate. There is a lot of openings in OTIR for researchers, for moderators, designers, coders, like anything you can do, like if you have some free time on your hands, or if you can make a small donation, it's also very much appreciated. It will go forward to the further development of the website, and maybe even we can do something like a collective foundation to help the most needed guys. We'll see about that. Another interesting tool that I have built already into the website is the sponsorship program, which will allow people to put their requests for sponsorship and match them to the available sponsor according to the location, to the language they speak, and it's kind of automated. So like the sponsor application, of course, they are getting approved manually to see if the people actually, qualify to be, to sponsor a less experienced TIs, because we don't want people who are like 20 years in TI experience and they still think like the neighbors are about to kill you. Those cases exist, unfortunately. Some of them are very prominent in TI community, and get a lot of people confused and even more terrified than it needs to be. So the website is going up. I really hope you visit it, check it out. If you see any bugs or something, let me know. And of course, the feedback is most welcome. Yeah.
Excellent. Well done, Peter. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate all the work that you've done for the community, for TIs in general, and for really, when you think about it, you might be doing work for humanity and our reality. I mean, really, this is what I sometimes feel like. We're talking about our reality here. So, but yeah, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to hear it, and it's really like if you're talking about coincidences and synchronicities, it's very cool that I was able to meet you, meet Kevin, all the other guys like Kanga, like Jimmy, and we have developed this friendship and this quite sustainable and stable community of influencers, of community organizers, and which is making a really big difference to traditional and former TI community, as it was a pit of negativity, of militants, revenge porn, etc. People come to me all the time and saying that they found help, and they found they were able either to exit the experience or at least progress towards it, thanks to my materials. And I see in your community people getting real help, and they getting progress as well, which is incredible. And I just very glad. And you're doing the great work. I appreciate everything you do so much. So I think you're, you and Kevin, you're just basically movie stars by this point.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Hey, everybody, go check out OTIR.org. Well, yeah, it should be up probably by the time this comes out. So, and on Reddit, OTIR subreddit. So, yeah, thanks again, Peter.